even though we've, me and Nicho, we've just met today, but like as a, to me, I look at you as like a brother because you're out there, setting the bar and, setting a standard and being a role model to the younger ones. So for me, I'm just like naturally your biggest cheerleader because of the fact that we are connected. And same with you, Marlee, I love seeing all the stuff that you're doing and the fact that we have the same bloodlines and, the same background, it is an instant connection.
This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Gadigal people, one of the 29 clan groups that make up the Youre Nation. We acknowledge the traditional owners who are connected to this land and acknowledge their unbroken connection and sovereignty to all the lands that now make up Australia. We extend that acknowledgement to all of the traditional owners connected to the country you may be listening to this podcast from. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Before we get into today's episode, we do want to warn listeners there is some content that could be triggering for some people. If there's anything that's brought up today that affects you, know there is someone out there to listen. Make sure you call Lifeline on 13 11 14. Hello and welcome back to When We Grow Up, the podcast when we ask where we've been to know where we're going. We're your hosts. I'm Marlee Silva.
I'm Nicho Hynes.
Today,
I keep forgetting to do that.
Today, we are joined on these very comfy couches with the one and only Megzy Waters. Such a pleasure to have you. You're the host of Yokayi Footy on NITV and you do millions of other things that we're going to get into, but thanks for being here. How does it feel?
Thank you so much for having me. Well, I think first and foremost, congratulations to you two on creating this, epic platform. I think it's really nice to, have the banter that you guys do, but you've really started to create some really important conversations. So I'm really proud to share this space with the two of you.
Appreciate it. It's all my doing. It was all my idea. So Marlee just comes in here and I got all the planning. I do all the run sheet.
Yeah.
I think this is the first guest Marlee's brought on. Like every other guest, it's been my doing.
That's a lie.
Nah.
That's a lie.
No, it's not.
It's straight away, it's a lie. I was the one who, anyway, we're not going to do this argument. We've got to be professionals.
How did you two meet?
Just
randomly.
Yeah,
I
just
think through the gram,
Yeah.
actually.
The gram.
Yeah.
Through the gram. And, I think that's kind of what is really funny about the world that we live in nowadays. And I think, well, something for me, and I think first and foremost, and we'll get stuck into it, but I'm a pretty passionate Warumungu Yawuru woman. And I think being mob, all three of us, even though we don't necessarily have like a long history of being mates, we don't go way back. I feel like our history goes way back. So naturally that kind of connects us. And so even though we haven't really, spent much time together, I think, I've always been in your DMs, like cheering you on when you do epic shit and vice versa. And I think, we're all three of us are naturally bound by the same thread. Sure. So I think it kind of elevates that connection a lot quicker, I reckon.
Definitely.
Well, lucky for you, unlucky for me that I've spent a lot of time with Marlee.
I know we're about to move in together.
Already sick of each other. I definitely want to talk about that in a little bit and actually leads into the first question that I have. But before we get there, we did warn you before we got on mic that we start all of our episodes by reflecting on a win and a challenge from the week gone by. So something that made you feel pretty good, something that maybe didn't feel so great. So, Nicho, do you want to kick us off?
Fuck you, man. Okay, a challenge for me would be, I wasn't going to say it because it's fucking embarrassing and I get really self-conscious about things on my body. And I had a boil on my bloody cheek. And it's not my fault because I have 5 to 10 showers a day. After everything I do, I shower. So I'm blaming all my teammates here. And every footy club would know that ringworms are a thing, sometimes boils, infections, because you're around each other having bar baths and ice baths. So it gets around footy clubs, and I've been so proud of myself that I've never, ever had a boil in my whole entire life. In one game, I got a cut, a scratch, and then some of the boys had boils and they got infected, turned into one, and now I had this big fucking lump on my side of my cheek.
Face too.
I
It's
know.
always a hard one to hide, isn't it?
I seriously.
Especially when you got cameras on your face for your career.
Yeah, remind me again.
Let's have a look. It's
fine now.
Yeah, it's fine now, but it wasn't.
Okay.
So that was a big challenge.
You can't be that clean because you had staph a couple of weeks ago too.
Are you right?
Sorry.
It was on my knee. And I went into a spa bath and an ice bath and then but that's sweet.
Yeah.
You go.
Anyway, what's your
bring
win?
out all my flaws in front of everyone.
Keep you humble, as you
Are we
said
going
to
challenges, everyone, or me into a win?
Go straight into a win.
Pressure's on.
A win would be for me, since now the boil's gone, I can get back into my daily routine on going down for my morning swims. And because when I did have the infection, they warned me away from getting into the water in case it was dirty and it could make it worse. So, but now I'm back into my sunrise swims, my morning routine, start my day off right, and I feel good again.
Beautiful. I love that. For me, a challenge. So I sit on the board of a couple of different charities, and one of them is Cultural Choice Association. Our big campaign every year. So we run mental health programs in some schools on the Central Coast with some Aboriginal high school kids. It's always a great time. The kids are always amazing, but our big campaign sits around the NRL's Indigenous round. So the kids paint the footy boots of quite a few players. And every time we get to this point in the year where it's just about to happen, something happens. Shit hits the fan in some way, shape or form. And I was so confident that we weren't going to have that this year. We employed someone. We had everything, because as a board member, it's a volunteer position, but we didn't actually have an employee to run things. So all of us in our spare time try and pick up the pieces, but we finally had someone in place, and they resigned last week, a week out from our biggest campaign of the year, which just stresses everyone out. And obviously, I've been involved in the organisation for a few years, so we have very deep personal connections to what we do. And it's very easy for me and everyone who's involved in the organisation to pour their whole selves into it and try and solve all the problems and whatever. And I just didn't have the capacity to do so last week. And then I felt really guilty about it.
You should.
And I tried to it just was a bit of a nightmare, and it just, I just felt so stressed about it. And that was a real big challenge. But on the flip side, I ended up seeing the end products, what the kids did, that made me feel really good. And I would have to say that my win is sort of related in terms of having to do with a young fella that I got introduced to by a friend of mine who's a teacher. And she just told me that this student of hers is really passionate about wanting to work in sports media, and she asked me if he could come and shadow me at ABC one day. And originally it was sort of we don't really usually do that, but I was like, nah, stuff it. I'm finding some way to bring this kid in, because I actually did my year 10 work experience was at NITV, and that was so transformative for me. And I was like, I can be in media because I've seen people like me. So I was able to bring this kid into the space on Friday, which was definitely a massive win for me. And he just was so stoked and texted me about 10 times after thanking me so much. So wins and challenges. This is life, up and down.
Megzy, what have you got for us?
Okay. Well, I love that, by the way. That's really special. And I think, again, coming back to being mob, it's really important that we, create the pathways and those sorts of things. So good on you. My win and my challenge, I would say, is a bit of a combination. Firstly, I've been really busy this year. It's been probably one of the busiest work years ever. And it's meant that obviously because of that, you're prioritizing that over kind of socializing. So I haven't seen my mates as much as normal, and we're all a pretty tight group. We all live in the same neighborhood. So it's usually we just kind of, go down to the local watering hole on a Friday arvo, watch the footy, and
Mount Martha?
No, in Elwood at Blue Tongue, it's called. Shout out Blue Tongue. Pretty much own shares in that place, basically. But so that hasn't been the case this year. And anyway, we had a friend's birthday on Saturday night, which was lots of fun. We all got together again, but I went in there, I was like, I'm not drinking. I've got a massive week coming up this week with work. And of course that lasted 0 seconds. So it was my win is that I got to catch up with all my mates and we had a really great time. But the challenge is that, I think because I haven't been as social and out and drinking and stuff as much lately, having a bit of a late night really sets you back. And, Nicho, speaking about your morning routine, I really value mine as well. And normally I'm up and about on a Monday morning, sprightly getting out, going for a run or going for a walk, and the snooze button got hit a fair few times this morning. So, the challenge is just battling the hangover blues. They don't just last one day for me these days. They're like a 2 or a 3 day thing. So,
especially as we're getting older.
It's hard.
It is. I hate that. But yeah, no, that's good that you got that space to go and socialise though, because like you're saying, so busy.
Hey, before we go on to the next part, so on Saturday night, did you have a dance?
I did have a little bit of a dance. I had a boogie. Let the hair, I well and truly let the hair down.
Okay, so if you let the hair well and truly down, did you have a club pash?
Well,
She's
my
got a
boyfriend.
partner. You can't do that. She's got a
Sorry,
partner.
what's his name?
His name's Ross. So yeah, we had a
Ross.
few pashes on the D floor.
Good.
For sure, yeah.
That's good. That's a good healthy relationship that still does like club
Well, obviously, I've
pashing.
been well prepared for this. I've done my research, but sorry, Ross. Hope they were nice pashes.
He'll love that. But I'm sure, I've heard you love a club pash, Marlee.
Yeah, and this is so funny because he is such a fiend for them. More
I'm
than
not.
I am.
No.
Anyway, I thought it was only fitting that we start with that age-old question that we as blackfellas always ask when we meet someone, which is, who's your mob and where you're from? And you kind of started to allude to that. But yeah, in that, it would also be great to hear from your perspective, why is it so important that we start those conversations like that?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I'm a Warumungu Yawuru woman and very passionate at that. I grew up on Larrakia country, so up in Darwin, which I'm so grateful that I've kind of had that duality between living in Melbourne. I think I've lived in Melbourne now for about 12 years, but Darwin's will always be home for me. It's where my family are. So I try to get back there as much as possible. And it really is like, it is a double life because they're complete worlds apart, Melbourne and Darwin. And so I'm really grateful that I have that kind of dual experience. But, I think we didn't necessarily always grow up with heaps of people, especially in media and as role models and creating conversations. We grew up in a bit of a different time, and I think there's always so much work to be done, and there's always changes that are, going to need to be made. But I think, creating conversations and just being real proud of where you come from and being proud of our Indigenous background is so important because it creates that pathway, like you were saying about that young fellow, it creates the opportunity for them to feel proud and opportunities and doors for the next gen. So I think that's, super important.
Yeah. I always think like for non-Indigenous people who kind of hear us have those conversations of who's your mob, where you're from. And I remember once in a previous life when I had like a proper 9-to-5 job, having a colleague of mine be like really taken aback with me, meeting someone and talking about that and figuring out how we're connected and whatever, and then being like, wow, that's like so amazing. And we take it for granted, I think, in a lot of ways. But my favorite part of that, when we talk about who our mob is and whatever, it's because we're looking for that connection. And I think that everyone can take something from that, whether you're a blackfella or not. If you're going into a conversation, meeting someone, wanting to connect, wanting to find things that you have in common, or that's only a positive thing, right?
100%. Yeah. And that's, like what I was saying at the start, like, even though we've, me and Nicho, we've just met today, but like as a, to me, I look at you as like a brother because you're out there, setting the bar and, setting a standard and being a role model to the younger ones. So for me, I'm just like naturally your biggest cheerleader because of the fact that we are connected. And same with you, Marlee, I love seeing all the stuff that you're doing and the fact that we have the same bloodlines and, the same background, it is an instant connection.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that sort of stuff. I'm so stoked to have you on. And I've been such a big fan of what you do as well. So to kind of put it in a nutshell, you are a TV host.
Hence why you speak so well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you're doing a better job than Marlee too.
I must say though, I don't even know how we came about, but I think I followed you ages ago because you were somebody that obviously was like in this space, and we'll get into it, but like this the media landscape for me is really foreign, or at least it was when I got into it. So you were somebody that I was like, this is a chick that I need to kind of like, follow and, get behind her story because you always need to have people, walking the
Healthy competition too.
Yeah, competition. No, there's space for everyone.
Codes,
yes, exactly. But yes, I mean, you're killing it in the TV space. You're also have a gym that you co-own and you are a Nike trainer and all these sorts of things. You're saying it's the busiest year of your life so far. How do you manage all of that?
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, and to kind of extrapolate it, like this space.
That's a big word.
Extrapolate.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't actually think I do either. Does it make sense?
Yes,
is it the right word? Okay, great. To kind of go back, like for me, landing in the media space has been a massive door opener, and it happened really randomly. And I think it's kind of funny because all the things that I'm doing now are super connected. And the reason that I even ended up as a co-host on Yokayi Footy is because I've worked in the fitness industry predominantly for like the last 8 years. It's kind of been my adult life. That's been my career. You know, going back to connection and whatnot, like I've met a lot of epic legends working in the fitness industry, particularly in like the group fitness space. And, you know, I've made some of my best mates are through that. And it was like back in COVID days, I'd gone back up to Darwin because at that point, obviously the fitness industry had really shut right down. And I was like kind of reevaluating whether or not I wanted to stay in the fitness industry. I'd gone back to Darwin and spent a few months there, and I was able to spend some real quality time with my family. My grandpa was still alive at that point. So it was really special to be back there. And I was like, actually, shit, I think I could see myself relocating and being back in Darwin. Anyway, I was kind of, you know, as everyone did in COVID, really reevaluated like what was important and who am I and what do I want to be doing? And it just created space, which was really good. And so anyway, I came back to Melbourne and was sort of figuring out, do I want to stay? Do I want to go? And in my mind, I had this intention that I was going to pretty much come back to Melbourne, kiss everyone goodbye, not pash, no pashing, no pashing then. Ross wasn't around then, but no, there was no passion. But I was going to kiss everyone goodbye and make my way back home. And one of my old clients from a boot camp that I used to teach in Elwood reached out to me, and she was like, and at this point I'd kind of like turned my like universal radar on. I was like, you know, where am I supposed to be? And I'd kind of started thinking about all the things I wanted to be doing. And it was like once I'd flicked that switch, these opportunities started to present. And
sort of waiting for something to drag you towards there and go, all right, that's where I'm meant to be.
Yeah, it was so weird. It was like almost happened instantaneously. Like it was sort of, I flicked this switch in my mind and I was like, all right, opportunities, I'm ready for you. Like I'm open. And it was in that same week, one of my old clients reached out and she was like, you know, look, I work on this show that already had a season done prior to me starting. She was like, we're looking to hire or cast the female Indigenous lead, like the co-host role. I know you don't have any media experience, literally none, not a second of, but I reckon you've got the gift of the gab. You can talk a bit of shit, like you'll be right. You want to go, try out for it. And I was like, you know what, fuck it. I've got nothing to lose, like everything to gain. And I had zero expectation that it was going to eventuate into anything further. For me, I was like, it'll just be the experience of going along to a job interview. And, that's always really good opportunity to learn. Anyway, yeah, so I was like, yep, cool, said yes, went to the job interview, went to the first audition, went really well, and they called me back to do a chemistry catch-up with Tony, who was a co-host at the time, and we got along like a house on fire. And then they started ringing my references, and I was like, oh, shit, like, is this actually going to happen? Not prepared for it at all. But, one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was, getting ready to record a TV show at AFL House, and for me, I was like, I didn't come from a footy playing background and I was just a fan, and I just couldn't see how they were going to tie my story into this show at all. But it worked out, and here we are 3 years down the track. So it certainly opened some pretty exciting doors, and it's meant that the last, particularly since we've kind of come out of that really shitty COVID time, like there've been some really cool opportunities that have come up off the back of it. And I'm excited. But going back to your question, sorry, that was a real long-winded answer.
No, that's
but
right.
I think managing it, sometimes I actually don't manage it very well, and that's the hardest thing is like, and I've actually kind of been in that space present of the last kind of month where the gym's been really kind of taxing on time and energy. So I've just had to pull back and just put some boundaries in place, and reached into my mindfulness toolkit again because I've been feeling pretty anxious lately with the workload. And yeah, I've got to get the toolkit, and at the moment I've been seeing a hypnotherapist and doing some mindfulness bits and pieces. But yeah, it's always a battle trying to manage workloads.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, what a cool
Do
story.
you do air locker with Shandor?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So Shandor, so we own Air Locker Brunswick, my business partner and I, but Shandor's always in and out.
Cool.
Of course, you would have played together.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, he's a legend. So
Yeah,
they're doing really well. I think we were maybe the 12th or 13th studio to open, and now they've got heaps more rolling out this year.
Geez, you like to keep your plate full. Hey, just casually, just co-owning a gym and being a TV host and all those sorts of things. But yeah, good to know you've got that in mind, that mindfulness and looking after yourself.
Hey, I don't know if we're going to touch on it a bit later, but you talk about your mindful tool kit bag. I don't know if you had a plan to ask you questions later, but when did you start getting into like the mindfulness and really worrying about, you know, your mind, your mental health, and that's probably the most important part of being a successful person, I believe. So when did you start believing in that?
100%. My mindfulness practices have evolved heaps over the years. I think and with this podcast, it extends back way back. My sister's always been like a real spiritual kind of woo-woo person, and so, you know, she would always be doing like hands-on healing and Reiki and stuff with me from a young age, and but I think I really started to create my own mindfulness toolkit over I would say probably like during COVID really was when I really got into it, because obviously that time was mega challenging for everyone, and it was like, fuck, my mind is just not in a good place. I have to do something about it. And yeah, that was when I really started to do the work. And, you know, at that point I was sort of seeing a kinesi, and I had a lot of health stuff going on as well at that time. So I was trying to, you know, see a psychologist to manage what was going on with because I have an autoimmune condition, and seeing a specialist for that. And so I was doing a lot of work, and I found things like journaling at that time really beneficial, because I had a lot going on in my mind. You know, you talked about being self-conscious about skin stuff, and that was a lot of stuff that I went through. So I had to lean into writing a lot to express how I was feeling. And so, yeah, I would say like COVID really amplified that mindfulness space for me. And it's now something that I'm like, it's probably one of my biggest passions.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we're going to get more into it. I'm just conscious of getting too far ahead of ourselves before we bring up some photos for you to look at.
Well, don't ask leading questions then.
Jesus. The first picture that I wanted to bring up, which you'll be able to see behind you in a moment, is this cute little bubba.
Little fat gal.
You've got your hands on your hips. You're just in a nappy, it looks like. And you're smiling, nice toothy smile there.
The big pegs are out.
How old are you in this photo?
I reckon in this picture I'm about probably 3, I would say, between 2 and 3. And, you know, obviously when you look at a photo like that, I don't necessarily remember being that old. But it was when I looked at that picture, I was like, it's just so wild to look back at yourself like that. Like you almost forget that, holy shit, that little tiny egg was me once upon a time. And, you know, and at that point, all that I knew and all that I was learning was like how to eat and like maybe how to say mum and dad and like
how to count to 10.
Yeah, literally apple, banana, like that's the stuff that you're learning at that point. Your brain is so innocent and impressionable, and yeah, it's pretty wild to think, you know, 30 something years on from that now. Like,
how old are you?
I'm turning 35.
Holy
this
Jesus.
year.
You look 20, so it doesn't matter.
I thought you were turning 40, but
I know. So yeah, that's a whole nother topic. 30s.
No wonder you weren't Club Passion.
Yeah, exactly. I learnt my lessons the hard way. But yeah, speaking of lessons, I just think back and I'm like, holy shit, I've really because in the grand scheme of life, 30 years, like it's not that long really, but I've certainly crammed some lessons into it. But I think what's so funny about this picture and like what, you know, when I look at it, I kind of think like, fuck, nothing's changed. Like that's still the same person. Like, and I've always been the type of person to be pretty, I would say pretty confident, and I always like to be in front of a camera. And, you know, I think because I was the only kid to my mum and dad. Like I've got brothers and sisters, but they're all heaps older. Like in there, I think my sister was 17 or 18 when I was born. So she's got a kid that is closer in age to me than what they were with me growing up. So my nephew is more like my little brother, really. Yeah, I just think it's funny how I've still got so many of the same qualities. Always like to, me and my high school mates would always like be, you know, coming up with these big storylines and filming little shows and stuff. So yeah, I find it kind of funny that even all this time has passed, I still see myself as that little girl.
Oh, yeah.
What was your earliest memory of your first dream of what you wanted to be when you're older? If you could remember from that age, but might be like a year or two later. Sport has always been a big thing for me. And I think going back to representation and being mob and that kind of thing, like one of my like ultimate idols and role models when I was growing up was Kathy Freeman. Like I remember Kathy Freeman like walking out in that full piece, just like that is such a vivid memory of my mind. And I was always a real sporty kid growing up. And I think because I wasn't the only child, but I kind of grew up in my house as the only child. So for me, like going to school or like going and playing sport was like my favorite thing because it meant that it was an opportunity to interact with other people and other kids. And so I always thought that I would end up being like a Deadly Star netballer or something like that. So I didn't quite get there, unfortunately, but I think it's still, it's still relative to what I do kind of now, I guess.
It's so wild because I reckon, every blackfella I know around sort of, our ages says they remember that moment and how influential it was. That's, for me, is my earliest memory, is jumping up and down on my lounge watching Kathy cross and losing my mind when she's walking around with the flag. Like I just remember, like I was 5 years old, but I knew it was such a huge deal.
Yeah.
And I think that is the prime kind of metaphor for how important representation is.
Oh, yeah, 100%. You hit the nail on the head. And I think like, it's so great to see like, it was kind of few and far between back then. But now, especially like with you boys, like there's so many brother boys out there playing rugby and footy and like, us working in media, like there is a lot more representation nowadays than there was, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. So, there was another photo that you showed me, but is not going to be up on the screen.
Oh, why not?
Because I'm respecting the boundaries, but in the DMs you were like, this is not for the show, but this is what I don't know what I'm doing. Clearly just having a good time. A bit like what you did on the weekend. I'm assuming that was sort of like late teens, early 20s. Back then, what were you like by that point and what was the biggest hurdle you were facing?
Yeah, I think.
And were you still in Darwin?
Still in Darwin. Yeah. And to describe the photo that I sent Marlee, it was like the Darwin Cup. Have you ever been to? You would have
I've been to Darwin.
Been to Darwin. So Darwin Cup's like the equivalent of, I don't know, Melbourne Cup, but very, Darwin style. And I've always been a real social character and I love my mates and I love having a good time. And the photo I sent Marlee was me with my shoes off, like bent over and blind drunk at the races. Just looking like, that was my trash bag era, I call it. And, I think it's funny. I think speaking about it, I guess a challenge from that period was that, I played sport up until my late teens and I loved it. I was really good at netball and I was really good at touch footy. But
touch footy, yeah.
Yeah, it was, and they, go away and represent the NT for each code and I loved it. But then I kind of got to that age of, kind of discovering boys and, booze and, that kind of became a bit of a distraction, I guess. And that was probably quite a challenge because it meant that I didn't really become super focused at that age on exactly what I wanted to do. And I found it kind of challenging leaving school because I loved school so much because of the social component of it. And I wasn't really a very good learner. I don't know what it is, but I excelled in classes like PE and outdoor ed and drama, but the learning side of school was really challenging for me. So when all my mates were going off to go to uni and stuff, I was a little bit lost because I kind of, I could see that sport wasn't going to be the thing that took me somewhere. I wasn't quite good enough. And yeah, obviously I didn't have as much direction. So I kind of got lost in a little bit of that distraction phase for a while. And anyway, I ended up deciding that I wanted to travel and went and moved overseas for a couple of years, which was really good because I think life skills are invaluable. And even though I didn't go to uni to learn, anything necessarily, I learned a lot of life skills by traveling at a young age. And that, that kind of cemented a few things for me when I got back. I just knew that I wanted to be, as much as I love Darwin, it meant that I wanted a little bit more opportunity and I knew that I wasn't going to get it there. And so that was what kind of sparked the move to Melbourne. But yeah, I would say it wasn't a natural kind of journey for me to get to the point where I am now with kind of knowing exactly what I wanted to do. It's been a bit of a grind to get there.
Why Melbourne?
That's
why did you choose Melbourne?
At the time, well, actually, when I was living over in the UK, I'd met a boy over there, and he had the opportunity to come over to Australia, and it was between Sydney or Melbourne, and I had already had a couple of friends in Melbourne, and so it was like between either here or there, and I think it was just the fact that I had already had some relationships formed there, and that's kind of what took me there initially. I had no idea that I was going to end up staying there, and really kind of being pretty grounded there now. It's definitely home away from home, and I don't see myself kind of being anywhere else for this foreseeable future. But it's paid off because I love it. Other than now when it starts to get cold, I'm always like, take me back to Darwin.
Yeah, Melbourne is beautiful. I love Melbourne. I love my time there.
It's a great city, and I think one thing we haven't really heard yet, and is a big question I have considering that you are the co-host of an AFL show, is where does footy come into your life, and what role did it play?
AFL, not footy.
Well, she calls it footy, her footy.
You're in Sydney now.
Yeah.
I'm in NRL country.
Yeah. Yeah. What part did it play in your life? Like, did you play any of it at all, or how is that? I guess now it's such a big part of your life, but what was it growing up?
Well, funnily enough, growing up, I played a little bit of footy when I was young, but it just, we all know my age now. I'm so sad that came out. But, obviously back then there wasn't as much opportunity to play footy, AFL for girls. And that's why I ended up playing touch footy. And my dad was a massive rugby league supporter. Like, I actually grew up more of a rugby league follower than footy in my household. He was from Brisbane, but of course, like, we were into all sports, like most dads and most men are. So we'd always kind of flick between the footy, of the weekend. And for me, my connection to footy, which is kind of, random that I've ended up as a co-host, is that it's purely just from a fan base, I guess. Didn't get the opportunity to really follow through with it because it just wasn't a thing. And that is something that I'm really so proud. And it's happening in the NRLW as well, but like sports for women is just such an exciting time for young women, particularly to just have so much more opportunity. It makes me gets my heart excited because I've got one of my cousins, she's more like my sister, but she's got 13 kids.
Wow.
And a lot of the all of the girls that are kind of in their teens, in that little tribe, they're all playing footy.
Yeah.
And it's awesome, especially one of my little nieces, Michaela, I think she's about 16 now, and she's 100% going to end up playing AFLW because she's so good.
Very good.
Yeah, so it's really good to see that that's sort of changed.
Being a fan and having the conversations that you do now with athletes, I find often there's so much passion in an interviewer's voice when they just love the sport and they love what you're doing. One of the things that I've really admired that you've done in your role in the last 12 to 18 months is, and it's unfortunate that you've had to do it, but to speak out about a lot of the racism that a few of the AFL boys have copped. It has felt quite intense for whatever reason. But yeah, tell us a bit about that, because it's also hard being that vulnerable when it is so personally affecting on that stage.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys would have had to have been in that space before too with what you do, and it is tough. Like sometimes it's like, you know, you could go into a week feeling really excited and like really prepared for work, and then the next thing you know something comes out in the news, and it's like immediately it just like dampens your spirit, knowing that like how are we still having to address this, and sometimes it feels like it's just like week in, week out, and I just don't think that. I guess I understand in a way why for non-Indigenous people it is hard to understand, because they don't have, like, they've never had to experience racism before, and you know, like talking about our shared history, like our mob's been through some of the toughest stuff over the last 200 plus, but however many 60,000 years plus, you know, our culture has been what it is. And, thinking back even just to my grandfather, who I sort of briefly mentioned before, he's like the king of our family, and he was part of the stolen generation. And, you know, just hearing what he went through, and to be able to actually sit next to him on a couch and hold his hand and have a yarn and like still think that how did we live through this time not even that long ago. So yeah, it brings up a lot of trauma when you have to constantly address that stuff. And I think it is hard for people that haven't been through that or haven't experienced racism to really understand the depths of it and why it is so challenging for us.
I just it grinds my gears talking about it, eh? Like, I just don't get it, how people can sit there and constantly boo someone who is entertaining you. You know what I mean? Like, picture that as your son or your brother or your family member getting booed 24/7 on the big stage purely for your entertainment. Like, you wouldn't do it, so why do it to someone else's son or brother or kid, you know? Like,
it's weird. I agree. It's obviously a kind of that speaks to the person though, really, doesn't it? Because I agree. I'm like, I don't even hang around with anyone who would boo, you know what I mean? It
feels like, out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, like it's just a weird thing. And like people that are just not nice and have negative opinions of people. And I mean, it's not even just mob. Like, I think that anyone who has even a second of their day to waste their breath on saying something hurtful or negative about another person, especially if it's a person that you don't know, it's like, what a waste of time. What a waste of energy.
Yeah. I think the one that really, really affected me recently was Jamara Ugle-Hagan. Him getting really upset on in the post interview and whatever. I think we were talking about it as well, because you just remember, this is a kid, this is a baby who just wants to play footy, as he said. And I wonder, with you and the platform that you have on the show, like, how do you manage, I guess, there's a responsibility there. And of course, when something like that happens, everyone sort of, like, we all experience this, right? I remember it being in high school still, like, if anything to do with Buffaloes was raised, it's kind of everyone turns and looks at you in the room. And you have that in a media, national reaching sense. How do you manage that responsibility?
Yeah, it can be really hard and like taxing on your own mental well-being too, like, because like I said, not only are you addressing what happened like to Jamara, for example, but like then unfortunately you can't help but reflect on like the things that, I've experienced in my time, or like, my mum, or like it's not just that one isolated incident, because it brings up so much more for you. And to be honest, hence why, we talked a little bit about the mindfulness kit. Like, that's another time where I really need to lean into that, pull out the tools that I need to help me get through it in those sorts of times, because it is hard, but in the same breath, it is also something I feel really, it's a responsibility, and it's one I don't take lightly, like to have a voice and to have a platform to educate, because, as I said, I also do have an element of understanding why some people don't maybe don't get it because they've never experienced it, or, you know, they've unfortunately been brought up with racism. Normal is normal for them. You know, they hear it in their house. And so, you know, for a lot of people, they have to change their mindset, and that's a really hard thing to do for a lot of people. So I think, you know, I really try to approach it from an awareness and an understanding place. And, you know, just I think the more that we have these conversations though, and the more that we share, because I think when you share your own vulnerability and share how much it hurts you or like affects you, people are a little bit more inclined to resonate with that. So yeah, it's definitely not a responsibility that I take lightly, and one I'm really proud to have. Yeah. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. The next photo that I wanted to bring up is probably one that's hard for you to talk about as well, admittedly. I saw the clip of your first ever time on Yokayi, and you said that you wanted to bring this photo along with you, so you had this person with you for that new step in your journey. And yeah, we've just got it behind you. It's you giving your beautiful late dad a hug. Tell us about this photo and the story behind it.
Yeah, it's a special one, and it's like I look at it and I'm like, gosh, you know, even that was this coming up to 9 years now since I've lost my dad. And you know, for me, he was my best mate, like, you know, a massive part of my life, of course, my dad. So and I think like going through this, so he had a terminal illness, he had cancer, and so it's really hard to watch the one pillar of strength in your life, your father figure, really kind of rapidly deteriorate to something that's so out of anyone's control. That was a really challenging time, not just for me, but my whole family. And so I look back, and actually when I was looking through my Instagram, and something that like I think is really cool that you guys actually do this, like it was really nice to actually have a little bit of time to reflect and scroll back through some pics, because our lives are so fast forward these days. I forget what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone, you know, 9 years ago or however long. So really nice opportunity to reflect. But this photo was actually probably one of the last times I gave him a hug, because that was taken in February 2014, and we lost him in July. So yeah, it's just, I mean, like, it's a special memory for me, and it wasn't even planned. Like, it was just like happened really raw that photo was snapped. But yeah, I mean, for me, I guess grief and losing somebody so pivotal in your life it teaches you a lot. It makes you really resilient, and it's a big part of why I ended up working in the fitness industry. And I've said this before, and one of the biggest lessons that I was left with through this experience with losing my dad was that one of the last things or one of the biggest conversations that stick in my mind from having with him at this point was he said, you know, one of the biggest things in my life that I regret is that I didn't take better care of my health. And that kind of changed the course of what I spend my time doing now career-wise. It's why I'm so passionate about movement and mindfulness and all that stuff, because when you don't have your health, you don't have a great deal of much else. And I saw that firsthand with him, and it was really tough to go through that. But, you know, it's also taught me a lot, and it's created a path for me, a career path. So as equally sad as I am grateful about that lesson.
And obviously there's the emotional side of grief, but you also had a physical experience, and it triggered psoriasis for you. So could you explain part of that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's it too, like far out. Like when pain and trauma goes unaddressed, for me anyway, it manifested through my health, which was funny because it was like I really had to do the work. And I'm glad that you asked, Nicho, before, like, when did you lean into that toolkit? Because that was the point. A lot changed for me with my own health. But, you know, those first few years after losing dad, and, you know, I was going through a few other things at that time personally that were really challenging as well. And a lot of it was compounding. And instead of doing anything to deal with it, I did everything try to avoid. You know, I'd partied a lot, and you know, probably ended up in not the right relationships. It also created some bad things for me as well, and just used all of that as a Band-Aid. And so I think naturally from that, because all of this stuff was just like festering, like literally inside of me. It had to come out somewhere, and it came out through having and getting an autoimmune condition like psoriasis. And so I really resonate with what you said before, Nicho, about like having that boil on your face. Like there would be times where I would be like covered, like head to toe, like red sores, flaky, like dandruffy stuff in my hair, and like you just feel so like unlovable and unworthy and just gross. So it really took like a lot to get out of that space.
So what's it called? Psoriasis.
Psoriasis.
For the people that don't understand or listening, so that's just, you just get inflamed skin and like you're saying, the flakiness and that.
Yeah, so it's autoimmune. So a lot of it, for me, what I identified that a lot of it was from internal. So I think there was an element of like, I obviously was, not eating very well at the time, and probably drinking, partying a little bit way too much at that period in my life, because that was like the numbing agent for me at that stage. And so it was like hard, because I was like also working in the fitness industry and wanting to pursue this passion of mine that I'd come about, but I also just hadn't learnt to deal with the baggage that I was carrying around. So it was really bad. Like I would just have all these sores all over me, to the point like it created actually, and I mean I never want to say that I like was depressed, because I never was clinically diagnosed as like I had depression or anything like that. So I don't want to use that terminology, but I would, at one point when I had it from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes, like my whole body was just covered. It was horrible. That was like a real dark time for me. Like my mum had to fly to Melbourne, and we went through like a really big series of healthcare sort of stuff at that point. So yeah, big journey and really challenging.
I think we have a photo that you sent me of that with all over your face, like and this is it's kind of wild that this is a big part of your story, because I'm not 100% sure what's happening with my skin, but I'll show you. Actually, I've got long sleeves on. I have scars on here from, well, I've always just thought it was eczema, because that's what I used to have as a kid, but it was triggered by a really stressful sort of year in my life, probably 8 years ago now. And I've got it at the moment. I've had a massive flare up over the weekend, like up and down my legs really bad, and I've even got stuff on my back and whatever. And it's something that I know is deeply affected by my mental health. But again, like I don't know, do you think that there's not a lot of education around the way that affects you physically? Because I think it's something that I've just gone, I've just got to keep using QV cream and I'll be fine. But it's not, and I've just not properly like fixed it. Yeah,
it's like so integral to the healing process. I think for me, it was like really understanding that like a lot of what this was from how badly I managed my mental health. Because ultimately, like, well, usually stuff like that presents on your skin in that sense, in our experience, is generally stemmed from, by the way, my tummy is grumbling so much. Can you hear it in the microphone?
No.
Okay.
We might hear it back. Do you need some food? Are you okay?
But yeah, sorry. So it usually stems from inflammation. And as we know, like stress, as much as food and things like that, alcohol, all those things create inflammation, so does stress. So a massive, like that's probably 90% of me getting to a good point with it has come down to the fact that I've done a lot of work on my mental health, so much. And so also just getting to the point too that like you become accepting of like the fact that this is part of my story and it's part of who I am, unfortunately. It's not like I chose to have it, but I can't sit there and, wake up every day and look at myself in the mirror and be like, fuck, you're gross. Like that's just not productive to anything. So yeah, learning to flip the narrative on your mind about that kind of stuff made a big difference to getting to the point that I'm at today with it.
Yeah. So do you feel like through it you've become better at listening to your body and just kind of addressing things as they come up? Yeah,
100%. And, I think first and foremost, like, getting to that kind of mental well-being space, like regardless of whether you have a skin condition or whatever it might be, like as I said before, we are living in like a really hectic world. Like there's just so much going on, and we, for a lot of us, like we've all got our own shit in our own stories. So learning to find what's in your toolkit to be able to manage those things is really, really important. And I think, yeah, for me, once I got control of managing my headspace and my mental well-being, I was like so many doors, and my health got better, work got better, everything's kind of, when you gain that self-awareness. And I think I heard you talk about that on the potty that you had with Jared on, just like, yeah, getting to know yourself is the number one way to get your shit together.
For sure.
It all starts in the mind, doesn't it? No matter what you do, like if you're a professional athlete, what you guys do on TV, or if you're a lawyer, you're a teacher, whatever, like everything always starts in the mind. So I'm so glad you spoke about that, because that's a message I try to send. You probably just worded it a lot better than I do, but yeah, regardless of what you do, like everything stems from your mind.
Yeah.
And like I never really knew they could get like sort of skin conditions you guys get through mental illness or mental health stuff. So yeah, it's just crazy how much like there's more we need to make it aware about how important your mental health is.
Yeah.
Not just because you want to commit suicide or you have a depression, like it's because of these sorts of things as well. It's not just what everyone sees out, everyone talks about. It's about these underlying issues as well.
Yeah, and that's what you said about like education. And I think like, why I share so openly about my psoriasis story, because like the more that we speak about it, the more that people are have an opportunity to learn and benefit them. And I mean, like I'm really open with the things that I've really benefited from with my journey with, getting my health on track and all that kind of stuff. And it's the simple things, but for me, it's like the three like non-negotiables, mindfulness things that are like my go-tos always is journaling is a big one. And it's not something that I do necessarily every day. Maybe I should. It probably would help me a bit more regularly, but it's always like the number one thing that I go to when I need to just like express what's going on internally. And then also just like actually just breathing. And I know like, we're breathing, we have to breathe to bloody stay alive, but to actually just carve out time at least once a day to shut my eyes, no matter, it could be anywhere. Like I did it in the Uber on the way here because, you're a little bit nervous about things, and to just like, for like a minute, just shut your eyes, connect to your breath, and just listen to the sounds around you. And I find that like such a powerful tool to just drop me back into the present and take me out of the circus that my mind is sometimes. And the other one is affirmations. And I think when you've got a skin condition or something like that, and when a lot of the things that it creates for me is like self-loathing thoughts and negative cycles in my mind, it's almost like tricking my brain with affirmations. So, sometimes I'd stand in the mirror, like when I had all that stuff on my face, and I'd just see like ugly and gross and unlovable. Like instead of that, I got really good at every day I'd get up and I've got this like list in my notes in my phone of affirmations. And instead I would stand in the mirror and read my affirmations and be like, I am beautiful. I am like kind. I'm smart. I'm funny. I'm whatever. And doing that every day, it was like just quietening my subconscious voice and making my voice louder. And I think the power that has is really big.
Yeah.
That is very powerful.
Yeah,
I like that.
What great tips. That's so good. The last photo that we wanted to bring up is a pretty recent one of you in store, in a Nike store, with your beautiful face up on a wall there. Yeah, this is pretty incredible. What an achievement. Yeah, do you want to explain what your newest one on the list is?
Yeah, wow. It was that was a pretty like massive moment for me, this one. And I think like going back to, and the reason why this photo is so special to me is because it reminds me of the little girl in the first photo, like that little fat girl who's just like smiling with the teeth out. Like I look at this photo and then I compare it to that and I'm like, that's who that little girl is. And, along the way I've had my ups and my downs and it's been mega challenging at times, and I've not felt like that little girl in the first photo or the girl that's in this photo here. But the Nike role for me is like, it's an absolute dream come true. For somebody that's worked in the fitness industry for a long time, I mean, it's Nike, like it's massive, and something that you know, even just like manifesting and stuff like that, you know, I don't know, this is not even something that we've really talked about, but it's something that I really believe in. And during COVID, one of the things that I did was I got 100 Post-it notes and I wrote on each Post-it note, and they were in my bedroom because I was obviously had nothing better to do with my time. So I was like, had all these Post-it notes, and on it I'd written like 100 different things that I wanted to achieve over the next 10 years. And it was like lots of things, you know, eventually becoming a good mum one day. I think I did this maybe 3 years ago now, but, you know, owning my own business and and being like part of a global brand like Nike. I didn't specifically say Nike, but that was on the wall. It was one of the Post-its, and you know, that just having something that I looked at and saw every day. I think, you know, it's crazy to think that, like, that was something that was like this deep desire in me, and I just had no idea how it was going to come about, or it was just a dream. Like it wasn't reality at all. So yeah, to look at that photo and think like, geez, I've come a long way, and I've really had to put a lot of work in to get to this point. But it's something I'm really, really proud of. And I'm excited. Like there's heaps of fun stuff coming up, and yeah, I think the biggest thing that makes me feel proud of that is knowing that like I've really put the work in to get there.
Yeah.
I think I would be a lot more happier, or you know, I think it'd be a bigger deal if it was Puma, but it's not Puma, it's Nike, so you know, it's okay. It's okay.
Sorry, had to say that.
It's a good accomplishment, but it'll be a bigger deal if it was Puma.
Love it.
And
healthy competition.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you, with the Post-it notes, that almost is exactly like the affirmations. Like you were waking up and you're looking at those things in the same way that you're looking at the affirmations. You're making yourself believe them. And so you would make yourself believe that you could achieve those dreams. And that's part of that manifestation, right? Like you know you can go for it, so you're subconsciously or consciously striving for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to really simplify it, and I'm absolutely not an expert at all in this space, but I think it's like we have something like 70,000 thoughts or something a day, and you know, imagine if like even just half of those thoughts were like positive ones and good ones and ones that we were really conscious of. And that's why I just feel like there's so much power in these little tools. And yeah, our subconscious can be a real fucker sometimes. Like it can be really damaging. And so I feel like it's just like tricking your mind with those little things. Yeah. But when you're doing it, it's like you have to do it. It's not like you just, oh yeah, cool, do it once, or like I've journaled once, or I've read my affirmations once. Like you have to be consistent with it in order for it to kind of pay off. But if you form a really consistent practice like those things, well, I mean, I think that's a massive testament to it, and I really credit that because I've formed a pretty good relationship with my mind. And don't get me wrong, like I go through some real shit times all the time, but it's like immediately when I know that I'm going through the shit, like I have lately, I've been in a not very good headspace. So but I don't want to sit in that space for too long, because why would you want to? Instead, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? What things am I going to pull out the box today? And recently I've been doing hypnotherapy and going around to my mate's house. She's got a full setup with like hot, cold therapy. And you know, it's like knowing and being self-aware enough to know, okay, I'm not in a good place. So what am I going to do to change that?
For sure. Well, I'll leave it to Nicho to ask the last question that we always ask.
Well, you've already sort of answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So picture Megzy as you are now, looking into a mirror, and there's young Megzy there staring right back at you. What would young Megzy be thinking of you right now?
Wow. It's I think she'd just be thinking, you're pretty cool. You know, like, so you sound like a bit of a dick saying that about yourself, but like, I think that little girl that we brought up at the start would just be really like proud. Proud's a big word for me this year, and it's something that I haven't always felt. And so it's kind of like my word of the year is just like proud at the moment, because I have achieved a fair bit, and it's really nice to acknowledge that. And I think if I was to say something to that little girl, and, you know, I'd let her know that you're going to feel a lot of feelings and you're going to cry, and times are going to be really tough, and you're going to lose people that you really love, and that's part of life. But ultimately, you know, you got a good crew around you. I've got good family, thankfully. I've got fucking legend mates. Like, I've got a really good solid network, and that, you know, when the times get tough, you'll be right. You'll get through them. So yeah, she's proud.
Oh, I love
That's
that
a great answer.
so much.
It's probably one of the best we've had.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I'll
Thank
take
you.
that.
Thank you so much for this chat. It's just been, yeah, so amazing. I think you've got so much wisdom in what you've been through, and you gave such great advice and have an incredible story. And you should know that there's, I'm sure, plenty of young Aboriginal girls who sort of look up to you and want to be like you one day. It's amazing. I think that I feel so proud of you. Like, even though, you know, as we've said, we don't really know each other that well, but it is, I love watching you succeed in the way that you do. I love the Move It with Megzy segment on Yokayi. Like, I just think that you are impacting people in a lot of ways, and I'm glad that you feel like that younger self will be proud of you, because you should be massively.
I've got one more question before we go. Since you're a really, really good TV host and you're successful, got any advice for Marlee how to be a good TV host?
No advice. I would just say keep being you.
Thanks.
Come on, give us something.
Wait until you see me do it first, and then give me some like critical feedback.
No, actually, I have watched you do it, and like I said, it's funny because it's just funny for me, because I think I followed you, like I said before, like you were somebody that I was like looking up to, and so it's funny how the ball goes, Nicho's rolling his eyes. But it's funny how things come full circle, hey, and like, you know, I was looking at you because I was like, fuck, what am I doing here? Like, I need to look at what other young girls, you know, how they're handling themselves in this space. So yeah, just keep being deadly.
Oh, thank you.
I want you to give each other a cuddle and a kiss. Thanks for joining us, Megzy. It was a great chat.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, it's I'm proud of you too, and I'm excited to listen to.
Why don't you look at me and give me some love and tell me how good I am?
Thanks, team. Love your work.
Thank you for listening to this episode of When We Grow Up. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. You can follow Megzy on Instagram. It's just at Megzy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. With a YY.
2 Ys.
Yeah.
Oh, she only wrote one Y here.
Oh, and
Well, we got
an
it right.
underscore.
And an underscore.
Wow.
We'll link it in the show notes. Don't worry.
Wow.
And other than that, we'll catch you next time. Bye.